Jesus prophesied that great events from heaven will come at the end of the age. That is, the origins of these great events will be from the realms of the heavens. But for us on the earth who are affected by these events, the question becomes, when will these things be and how will we know? And of course, the reasons for those questions is we need to be prepared. Well, Jesus said there will be signs in the sun, the moon, and the stars. We began by seeing that the evil one will be thrown out of the heavens as a result of the work of Michael, the great angel, and the forces with Michael, who wage war against the dragon, known as that old or ancient serpent, the devil or Satan. He'll be thrown out of the heavens. These are the sorts of things to the rational mind that seem fantastic, fairy tale, perhaps nightmare, Grimm Brothers kind of fairy tales. And it's no wonder that the rational mind is obligated to reject these things, because they're not part of any of our experiential history, and certainly not subject to quantification or prediction. That is why these events will catch the world unawares. It's not that we could not be made aware. It's not that God isn't making us aware. It is that there's a self-imposed blindness by an over-exaltation of the value of science, and in a sense creating an imperialism by which all things are judged as being important or not important. So, for example, if science doesn't agree that such things are possible, then of course the rational population will say it's not possible. But it'll happen anyway. You see, Jesus is not interested in being popular or famous or even well-liked, because he is God, and God's role entitles him to a supremacy that couldn't care less whether man believes him or not, once man has been told the truth. If you're told the truth and you don't believe, then God is not hesitant to bring the appropriate judgment or to unfold the events in such a way as he has foreordained, whether or not you then are prepared, if you elect not to heed the warnings and to understand the things that God has said. Let's understand that if you live without faith in the Most High, then the only thing you can know are the things that are, in effect, quantifiable and provable through a linear process. There's an entire world, a universe, if you like, of things and occurrences that do not ask the permission of the rational to occur, and will when it's time. But God doesn't do any of these things without warning his people. Because if the people of God are not warned in advance of the occurrence of these things will be shocking enough to the people of God, let alone the ungodly population, that men's hearts will literally fail for fear. Anything that overtakes the human race, that the human is incapable of addressing through his knowledge and other resources, will overwhelm him. But for the righteous, God warns us ahead of time so that we're not overwhelmed by the shocking events. So whoever will hear these things and trust God will be prepared. Whoever will not listen, they'll hear but not pay attention to the things that are said, their destiny is sure. They'll be overwhelmed by these events. Because the signs at the end of the age relate to these incredible events, they foretell the timing and the nature of these great occurrences. And because these great occurrences come not from the earth, though they end up on the earth, they come from the heavens, then the signs must be given by God. When it's just a matter of human society in turmoil and conflict, because it represents the maturation of conditions in the human heart and conditions latent to human society, when those progress to their natural paces and conclusions, then the signs may occur from the earth. Wars, rumors of wars, earthquakes, pestilences, and the like. But when these greater events than even those come upon human beings and come from the heavens, then humans cannot be held responsible for their own warnings because they don't know what these events, when these events will come, and they barely know what these events are, notwithstanding the fact that God has told us these things will happen and has written the record of them in Scripture. And the record of these things, of course, are also written in the book of truth. When the great events of the evil one being thrown out together with his minions, to then raise his opposition against God and the people of God on the earth, when that most disturbing of events occurs, the heavens will tell us of the imminence of its coming, the fact that it's right on the doorstep. And the signs will appear in the sun, the moon, and the stars. Look, before I get to that, let me give you an example. When Jesus was born, the record of Matthew and Luke in particular tell us that a great sign appeared in heaven. The wise men who came to visit him at the time close to his birth said, as their reason for coming, "We have seen his star in the east and have come to worship him." These wise men came from the upper reaches of Mesopotamia in what is now known as Babylon. And 2,000 years ago, the population of that area, like it is mostly now, were Arabs. The Arabs have a long history of observing the heavens. Many of the names of the stars are Arabic. For example, Zubin el-Ganubi is one of the great stars, clusters of stars. Al-Zimka is another of the great stars. It actually means the branch. Al-Zimak, Z-I-M-A-C-H, is one of those clusters of stars. And one of the reasons that these stars some of these stars have Arabic names is because the practice of learning the information that the stars presented has been long undertaken by Arabs. But before them, the courts of ancient Sumeria and Babylon had in these courts people whose learning was specifically in the stars. That wasn't only true of those ancients, but even in the days of the Romans, the entire order of Roman priests. Here I'm not speaking of Roman Catholic priests, just Roman priests in the Roman Empire prior to Christianity. The entire Roman priesthood, because Rome, as you know, had its own official religion. It worshipped a mother goddess known as Vesper and numerous other gods. But the practice of augury was to interpret from the entrails of animals signs in the entrails of animals that corresponded with the arrangements of the stars in the heavens. This was the routine practice undertaken in the great temples that dotted the Roman Empire. So, the stars of the heavens were long known to foretell incredible events. In the day when Jesus was born, the observers, these three wise men who made the journey from the upper Euphrates to Israel, a very perilous journey, one might note, did so because their imperative was to find the one who was born, the King of the Jews. And in their own words, we have seen his star in the east, and we have come to worship him. That raises an interesting question. You know, there are lots of things we take for granted as Christians because we live in a culture that has long supported Christian ideals, so we have not felt any need to actually ask the tough questions. But one of the questions we ought to ask is, well, when they were looking up in the heavens, what star did they see? Because they said, we have seen his star in the east and have come to worship him. What star did they see? What is it that they saw that caused them to say it was his star? And seeing that star, why did they come to worship? They brought gifts, important gifts. But their real purpose was to worship. Well, that means that meant that their intention in coming was to find a living God. These are important questions. We just assume, well, the story of Christmas has wise men following a star, so there you go. Wise men follow the star. But what was different in these nights, in the night sky, from before that would allow them to say, this means this? And when they followed that star and came to Bethlehem, did they in fact find what they were looking for? And says, of course they did. Why? Because you see, the observing of the stars was not a whimsical, magical sort of thing. They looked into the heavens for the clues of the great events that would occur on the earth. And they had so precisely understood the heavens that it was almost a matter of cause and effect to them. If you like, this was a different kind of science. The methodology was based upon observable phenomena, like science is. But their principles were different because they perceived that God had set the stars in the heavens for signs and for seasons, for days and for years. In fact, when Jesus was born, what occurred in the heavens was the appearing of a new star. It was a new star that appeared in the constellation Coma, which in its ancient roots, Coma in Hebrew, is the desired, or the desired one, or the desire of the ages. Now today, modern astronomers name the constellation Coma Berenices after an event that occurred about 200 years before Christ. That event was a queen of Egypt, whose name was Berenices, promised to give her hair to Venus if Venus would provide safety for her husband, who was going on a perilous journey. I believe the husband's name was Evergetes, E-V-E-R-G-E-T-E-S, Evergetes. And when this sacrifice was offered, the astronomer Canon exalted her sacrifice to the place of saying that Jupiter, the king of the gods, had taken this and put her wig, her crown of hair, in the heavens. So today, Coma Berenices is the hair of Bernice, the queen of Egypt of that period. But before that time, 2,000 years before that time, Coma was known in Hebrew as the desired one or the desire of the ages. And the companion understanding of it came from ancient Egypt, where Sheznu, that same constellation known as Coma in ancient Egyptian, was known as Sheznu, and it referred to the desired son. The desired son. The modern understanding goes back only to 200 years before Christ. The ancient understanding was the desired one or the desire of the ages. And it was literally the virgin, Virgo, which in Hebrew means virgin. It also in Arabic means the branch. In Latin, it's Virgo. And so we have actually, originally, the original term in Hebrew was Bethulah, and it meant virgin. That word in Arabic was a similar word in Arabic, which meant the branch, and the Latin equivalent is Virgo. Now, this was the brightest star in the heavens, or the brightest constellation in the heavens. And next to it was the constellation Coma, like the Virgin and the Sun. But according to the scriptures, in the book of Numbers, chapter 24, verse 17, a specific promise was made, and the ancients knew it. This promise was, a new star will rise out of Jacob. Here it is. This was actually one of the oracles of Balaam. I see him, but not now, Balaam's oracle says. I behold him, but not near. The him here is Jesus. The prophecy is, I see Jesus, but he's not here at the moment. I behold him in the distance, not now. A star will come out of Jacob. A scepter will rise out of Israel. It was the promise of a new star. A new star. When this bright star appeared in the constellation Coma, or the desired one, and again the constellation was positioned next to the Virgin, then the ancients knew that the heavens had released into the earth the true meaning of the desired of the ages. Now, Jesus himself is foretold by this star. Now, we know that there are new stars that appear all the time. There was a new star, and this star is the sign of the Son of Man. When this star appears again in the heavens, it will be about his second coming. And that's what Jesus is saying in Matthew 24, when he says, and then they will see the sign of the Son of Man in the heavens. What's the sign? The same one that came when he first came, the arrival of a star. And it's possible that this star comes every 2,000 years. They will see his star. Like they saw it the first time, they'll see it again. Now you say, this is a lot of talk about the stars. Well, the history of mankind is written in the stars. Why? Because God set them up in that ancient time at the creation of the world to serve this purpose. You may say, well, I thought that all the stars were named by the Greeks and the Romans. No, the stars have Greek and Roman names, but their description and even some of their specific names appear routinely in the scriptures. For example, in the book of Job, which by all accounts is the oldest of the books of the Bible, there God said to Job, canst thou bind the sweet influence of the Pleiades, the 7 stars of the Pleiades, or loosen the bands of Orion. Is there a constellation called the Pleiades? Yes. Is there a constellation called Orion? Yes. Who called them that? God did. When God spoke to Job about Mazzaroth, he was referring to another constellation in the heavens. Just as we spoke earlier on, Bethulah was the virgin. The Latin word for virgin is Virgo, but it was known in Hebrew before it was known in Latin. Right? So the constellations of the heavens serve this critical purpose. Why am I laboring this point? It seems like an awful investment of credibility to talk about the stars of the heavens when we've been warned not to get into astrology in the scriptures. There's a difference between astrology and astronomy. And these constellations are known to astronomers. They may also be known to astrologers, but they're known to astronomers. And the scriptures themselves say that these mighty events that come out of the heavens, when an event originates in the heavens, if God is going to fulfill his promise to the people of God on the earth to warn them and to not let these events occur without warning them, how is God going to warn of events that are taking place from heaven? We know how he warns with events that take place from the earth. How does he warn with events that take place from heaven? The stars tell us that. That's why Jesus himself said, there will be signs in the sun, the moon, and the stars. It's Jesus who said that. Now, the stars are not just planets floating around in the constellations. They mean something. They have meanings. So, for example, Virgo means the virgin. There's a constellation called Virgo, but there is a woman named Mary who is a virgin. She also is typical of that at the end of the age that will give birth to a son, the man-child of Scripture, the fully mature sons of God, the Huios Theo, the sons of God. And all creation is waiting for the revelation of such a thing. And the heavens will declare the majesty of this occurrence. And so, these great events, foretold to come out of the heavens, begin with great signs in the heavens. Here in Revelation 12, verse 1, it says, "A great and wondrous sign appeared in heaven." Where did this sign appear? In heaven. What's in the heavens? The stars. So where does this great and wondrous sign appear? In the stars, in the heavens. A woman, and the word here is synonymous with Bethulah, or a virgin, clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. She was pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. Then another sign appeared in heaven. An enormous red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns. Now, what does that mean? Because we find this 7 heads and 10 horns recurring throughout the scriptures. You can be sure that the next broadcast will be about 7 heads and 10 horns. Enormous red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns on his heads. His tail, or his influence, attracted a third of the stars, swept a third of the stars out of the sky and flung them to the earth. The dragon stood in front of the woman who was about to give birth so that he might devour her child the moment it was born. All right? Now, that's being said, and then immediately it is said there was war in heaven Michael and his angels fought against the dragon and his angels fought back, and they were not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. What is this telling us? It is telling us the exact timing in which we will see the demonic forces thrown out of the heavens coming into the earth. What is the sign? That in the constellation Virgo, there will be a crown of 12 stars. Normally there are 8. This constellation is called the Sombrero Galaxy because of the band of stars about her head. This time there'll be 12 as opposed to 8. And she is crying out, she's pregnant, it's about time that out of this, that is the church, will come now the mature sons of God. That's about to happen. But an enormous red dragon stands ready to devour the child. Who is the red dragon? In the heavens, the constellation is Draco, the dragon. On the earth, it's Satan himself who has come together with his minions to create this thing that is the beast of 7 heads and 10 horns. And with this 7 heads and 10-horned threat, he wants to devour that which God wants to protect. So on the earth, we will begin to see the actual manifesting of the demonic forces thrown out of the heavens and the rise of this global kingdom of 7 heads and 10 horns. But that I'm stating as a conclusion. I'll develop it in the next message. So stay with me, will you? I'm Sam Solen. God bless you. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Broken body, broken bread, blood turned wine, life for the dead. Surrender to Jesus your thoughts and your cares. Come walk with us and meet Jesus here. Broken body, broken bread, blood turned wine, life for...
Hi, I'm Sam Solen. I'm the host of the preceding program. We bring you these messages to encourage you in your walk with God. If you'd like a copy of this message, you may obtain it in one of 2 ways. You may obtain it by writing to me at the address on the screen, indicating what program that you desire, or the alternative is to visit our website at www.solen.com. You may download it for free. Either way, it's without cost to you, so feel free to write. If you'd like to know what's going on in the ministry, sign up on the website for our newsletter. Thank you, and God bless you. Bye-bye.